first couple of steps of the journey. So for the first slide that I'm going to be going over here, I just want to touch on some key verbiage that we're going to use, because something you're going to notice with financial aid is there's going to be a lot of abbreviations. There's going to be a lot of terms that you may not have heard of before and you may not be familiar with. So to get started off on the right foot, we just want to make sure that you are kind of functioning under the basic knowledge, at least to know kind of what we're talking about when we're talking about financial aid. So first is the types of applications that are available. So the first one, I know you've heard of it, is the FAFSA, right? FAFSA. That's the free application for student aid, or for federal student aid, and that's a free online application for federal and state financial aid. So this is something that all students are encouraged to complete if they're eligible to, just because it's the only way that you can become eligible for any federal grant programs or loan programs, as well as most state programs. We also have the CSS profile, which is another one that you might be familiar with. This is an online application specifically used by colleges and universities in order to help students apply for institutional aid, or the scholarships and grants that are coming specifically from that college or the university. So that's another nice tool, just because it's one that you can complete one profile and share it with multiple schools. So that way you don't have to do each individual application with each school. You'll notice not every school uses a CSS profile. For example, Elmhurst does not, but a lot of schools do. So it is a good tool to use and just kind of have in your toolbox there. The next one I wanted to go over is a first generation student. This is something that gets brought up all the time in terms of admission and financial aid. And the definition varies a little bit on this. So I tried to be relatively vague in the definition there, but generally it means that the student incoming to school, neither parent have attended college or attended university. Now, I say it varies a little bit because some schools say if the student hasn't had any parents graduate from college, then they would be a first generation student. Sometimes they say they could have attended but not finished, then they count as well. So again, the definition varies generally, but widely the definition is recognized to understand that neither of the parent students have a no, neither of the students' parents have attended college. And the reason that's important as a distinction is because those students are going in with a little bit less knowledge, right? They don't necessarily have the parents with the college experience that they can draw from to help them with this process. So these students who are first generation generally need a little bit more assistance in the process, just to make sure that they're getting all of the same opportunities that a student with that knowledge would be able to get. Next, we have the merit scholarships and the need-based financial aid. So these are the two main categories of aid types. Merit scholarships is financial aid that is offered to a student based on their achievement, like their academic successes, their extracurricular involvement, sometimes their music or artistic talent. They could be athletes, and if they're going to a school where they can get aid for being an athlete, that would be considered a merit scholarship as well. So these are things that are open to all students based on their achievements. Merit scholarships are usually given more on the private side, but we'll chat about that on the next slide here. So merit scholarships, again, not need-based. Income is not usually taken into consideration when we're talking about the merit scholarships. On the other side, we have the need-based financial aid. So as the name implies, this is based on a student's financial need, which is usually demonstrated by those applications that we talked about. So with these, a student's income, family size, parents' income, those kinds of things are taken into consideration to see if a student would be eligible for this. So obviously, need-based aid is not available to every student, just because the eligibility does differ. Usually, like I mentioned, there is limited to more high-need students and families when it comes to those finances. And then finally, for this slide here, I wanted to talk about the Student Aid Index, or the SAI, because this kind of ties the FAFSA, the need-based aid, and ties all those pieces together. So what this is when you complete a FAFSA application, the Department of Education takes all the data on that application and spits out an index number, an SAI. This number is provided to the schools, and we use this to determine what kind of aid a student is eligible for. So when you complete the FAFSA, you'll be able to see what your SAI is, and you can use that to help determine, okay, now that I know this, now I have a little bit of a better idea of what we're eligible for. So that is something that, directly impacts the need-based financial aid and comes straight from the FAFSA. So Nicole, if you want to pop us over to the next one,
Mhm.
we're going to chat a little bit about the difference in costs between schools. So when you're looking up at a school, if you just look up the tuition and you pull up the page, you're going to see the sticker price. So you're going to see the cost of what the tuition fees, everything is before any sort of financial aid. So those costs are helpful to know. They're helpful to compare between schools, but you're not actually getting the real picture when you just look at that price. So what's helpful to do is to take a look at the actual cost of what those schools are going to look like for you in order to make a more informed decision from there. So, some things to keep in mind when thinking about sticker price versus actual cost is schools award financial aid differently. So, if you just look online and you compare two schools' tuition pricing, they might look like one school is obviously way more expensive than the other school, but what you might not be seeing is that this school that looks more expensive, they also offer financial aid very aggressively. So it might turn out that that school is a little bit cheaper than the other school, right? Depending on what kind of aid you could be eligible for there and what those actual costs look like. So, one thing that you can do in this time, kind of getting prepared for these conversations, is if there are schools that your student is interested in, you can reach out to the school and inquire about their discount rate or their scholarship coverage just to see how much of this cost is actually going to be covered by financial aid. A lot of times they can give you an average or help to estimate for you what that actual net price would be for you. A lot of schools also offer a calculator on their websites where you can plug in your students' information. You can do income information, you can do achievements and things like that to see what kind of scholarships your student could be eligible for. And then it will tell you, okay, with all that information, this is what your costs are expected to be. So those calculators can be a really good tool for this time as well, just while you're collecting that information to help better inform your decisions later. It's a really great tool just to get some actual figures to what we're talking about here. The last thing on this slide is there are a lot of costs that are associated with going to school, not just that tuition. So it's important to make sure that you're looking at the full picture of what that's going to look like for your student. So if they're looking to go to school in Colorado, they're probably going to need to live on campus, right? You live here. They can't necessarily commute in that way. So you would need to make sure that you're looking at the cost of room and board for living on campus. Books, right? Books are not often included in those estimates. So might want to tack on a little bit more for those. So it's just important to keep a big comprehensive view of what those costs are going to look like so that you have as much information as possible to make those choices. And then the last slide that I'm going to be going over is a little bit of comparison between private and public school packaging. So as you can imagine, these schools function very differently, mainly because of their funding sources. So, public schools are government funded. So, for example, if we think of Illinois State University, that's a Illinois school. A lot of their funding is received from the federal government and the state of Illinois. Whereas a private school, like Elmhurst University, for example, does not receive as much federal or state funding. They do still receive some, but a much smaller percentage than those state schools. So, a private school relies more on the payments received from students and endowments or donations to kind of keep things up and running. So, obviously, because private schools are functioning with less federal or state aid, they have to charge more, right? They rely on those tuition dollars to keep the school operational. So, they need to charge a little bit more in terms of that tuition. So, if you're just looking at the numbers, private schools are going to look more expensive than public schools because those numbers are going to be offset. But like we mentioned, private schools usually offer a higher discount rate because they want to stay competitive. They know that the state schools have lower tuition, so they want to offer more scholarships, more merit aid, more need based aid to help keep those a little more balanced. Private schools, for that reason, are going to be more competitive when it comes to awarding scholarships and grants, especially need based aid, to help fill in that gap for the student to make the school more affordable. Whereas with state schools, private schools, or public schools, I mean, sorry, they might leave more gaps in the cost for the family and the student just because their tuition is significantly lower. So they do have a little bit more flexibility to do that. Tony's going to give us some really good examples of what this looks like in practice with specific schools, schools that your students may even be considering. So I'll turn it over to him and we can get some more information as far as that goes.
Awesome. Thanks, Megan. And
For Megan does have a family appointment right at 9:30, but we're going to try to get to some Q&A. Megan will hang on the call, and we'll get to that later. For those that don't know me, my name is Tony Menestra. I'm the director of the college counseling program here at DePaul. You met Nicole earlier. Nicole is works as a part of our team with our 9th and 10th grade families. She has just been an amazing addition back to the DePaul community and to our team this year. So I'm going to take you through some kind of practical examples of what 9th and 10th grade families can be thinking about when they're starting to build their idea of what a college list can look like. First of all, we have to understand that the college landscape right now, all 3,200 colleges in the U.S. Operate within a market, right? Like any consumer-based situation in the U.S., the college market is no different than a retail market, right? You will pay for the brand like any industry. That's the first thing you need to know as a consumer, right? There are certainly tiers of brands, and the price tag is going to be attached to that brand. That's really important to understand. There are 1,600 public universities, 4- and 2-year schools in the U.S., and about 1,600 private schools in the U.S., post-secondary private schools. Of those 3,000 plus colleges, there's definitely a tiered system in terms of cost and certainly brand. So that's really important to consider when you're looking at schools. College admissions has evolved into almost a capitalist business model, right? The schools that have leveraged themselves towards the top of the rankings can certainly charge a higher rate, right? Because there's much more consumer demand there. So I think once you start looking at colleges, not only as a place where your child will thrive and learn and grow, but from a marketplace standpoint, you have to understand how colleges fit within the larger kind of ecosystem of one another, right? Marketing and social media have really driven down the admit percentage at a lot of schools, right? So the social media blitz on Instagram, for example, has driven up a lot of likes and a lot of attention of certain schools, right? So that draws eyes. What does that do? It also draws more applications. With more applications, there's not more seats. It just drives down the admit rate, right? So as schools continue to market themselves as more selective, right, it's going to make that that brand look a little different out in the market, okay? Advertising is a big cost contributor as to why costs are going up for colleges. Sports, believe it or not, very few colleges, less than 5 colleges, make money on their athletic programs nationally. Sports cost colleges money. And amenities, lazy rivers, rock climbing walls, right? Marble countertops in the bathroom. All of these factors are driving costs up, which has made things difficult for families. In fact, from 2000 to 2025, public colleges have increased on average about 300% in their cost of attendance. Private colleges are close, about a 250% increase in that 25-year time. Now, if you look at wages over that time, U.S. wages, the average increase on U.S. wages is about 2 to 2.5% per year, which is way off, right? The inflation rate of what the cost of colleges looked like since 2000, since potentially many of the parents on this call were attending college, right? So the idea that a student could self-fund their education 25, 30 years ago was much more reasonable than it is now in 2025. So it's really important to have kind of a broader picture of cost and kind of why we are where we are. All right, here's a quick, honest look at our top 11 application destinations for this 2025 graduation class, okay? University of Illinois, you'll notice, comes in the lowest. Now, this is before, as Megan mentioned, any discount, any grants, loans. This is the sticker price at these universities, okay? University of Illinois, from an in-state perspective, is your lowest cost option of our top 11 application destinations, right? And that's an in-state choice. Your other schools, your public universities, you'll notice many of them are 60 to 80% more expensive, and in the case of Michigan, double the cost of U of I. You're paying out-of-state rates to go to an out-of-state public school. DePaul I have listed there. That's an on-campus cost at DePaul, so that includes your housing and your meal plan. But this kind of gives you a sense of what the range is of our top application outcomes for our current seniors. Okay, we'd love to get you guys turned on to our guy, Jeff Salingo. We'll have some parent perspective on Jeff's book and his podcast a little bit later in the presentation. But if you're interested in learning more about the economics of college admissions, right, and the marketplace and where we are right now as a college-going community, Jeff Salingo is kind of the industry expert. He talks a lot about the concept of buyers and sellers in the market, right? A college can either land in the buyer lane or the seller lane, and to different degrees in each of those. So what's a seller, right? A seller has a high volume of applications, right? They have a lot to choose from. Place like UCLA, for example, has 100,000 plus applications for, I don't know, an incoming class of maybe, I don't know, 8 to 10,000 students. So they're going to deny 90% of the applications, right? They have a high volume of apps. Because of the high volume of apps, they're not increasing the number of seats at the school. They have a lower admission rate, okay? We consider sellers to be under 20% admit rate, right? So they're denying 75 to 80% of the applications applied, right? Think of it in the market as like a Nike store, right? Nike doesn't need to discount anything because there's a line out the door when the new Jordans drop every year, right? So Nike is a seller, right? They don't need to attract more customers. They have plenty of people lined up outside on Michigan Avenue. So think of that as a seller, right? Typically, sellers have what's called a high yield enrollment rate. So the students that they're admitting have a much higher likelihood of actually attending. Now, admissions offices love this, right? They don't have to continue to recruit throughout the school year. They have a much tighter window on who they're admitting, and they have, you know, they're attracting and enrolling a majority of the students that they're accepting. That's a seller, right? Because of that reason, sellers are not inclined to offer merit money all that often, right? A great example is Northwestern University. Northwestern offers no merit money, right? They will meet full need, as Megan mentioned, right? They will meet full demonstrated need, but everybody applying to Northwestern is a valedictorian or near valedictorian, right? And because they have such a high yield rate, they're considered a seller. They're selling their brand to you, and they don't need to work very hard to get applications. Buyers, what's a buyer? Lower volume of applications, right? So they don't have as many students to choose from. Their yield rate is going to be lower. So they may have a higher admit rate, but a majority of the students may not choose to attend, okay? Different schools are going to have different matriculation rates, right? And enrollment managers across the landscape are always working to raise their matriculation rate. They want to enroll a higher percentage of students that they admit, right? This is just more cost effective from a business model standpoint, okay? Because of that, buyers will offer more merit-based scholarship, right? More discount to help enroll students, right? So think of it like a place that's going to offer like a sale at a retail space. That's to draw more customers in at a more attractive price point, okay? We'll give you a great example here at the bottom of the screen. University of Michigan and the University of Pittsburgh are two what I would consider peer schools in terms of rankings, outcomes, academic experience, faculty, very, very similar schools in terms of your academic experience on those campuses. But Michigan is a school we'd consider a seller, right? Their acceptance rate is near 20% nationally, and they're going to yield about half of those kids that they admit. That is a very high number. A 50% yield for a public school is very high. So average student, right? Average aid award, about less than 30% of students applying to Michigan or admitted to Michigan will be offered merit aid, okay? Look at the University of Pittsburgh. Again, very similar institution. Over 40% of students at Pittsburgh will be offered some sort of merit consideration, and their acceptance rate is almost 2 out of 3. They're close to a 60% admission rate or acceptance rate, okay? That yield is lower though, So they're admitting over half the students that apply, right? But they're only matriculating, they're only enrolling a quarter of those students. So you can see a really good example of two schools that are very similar to one another with very different operational outcomes. The next slide. These are some slides. You can't click these links, obviously, on this, but we will have this slide deck for you in PDF form on our website. And our previous two College and Conversations are also there. So you can access this. You'll be able to get these links live there. The net price calculators and the estimators are really cool tools. As Megan mentioned, financial aid offices are going to help your family determining what that financial aid package looks like. You can get kind of a preview to that by using a school's net price calculator. You plug in some basic information and you can get some generalized ideas of what your family would be, what that cost would look like for your family at a particular school. So we'll have those links up for you. And then we're pubbing, I promise Jeff's not paying for this Zoom, but we're pubbing Jeff's book here as well. All right, we're going to play a little game here. I'm going to do a little comparison, okay? A couple rounds of comparison. I want you to take a look at the two colleges I have set side by side here, okay? So both of these schools are private Jesuit, which is a Catholic institution out of state. They're both in the Midwest. They're both urban campuses. They have the same amount of students. Their admit rate is in the same range. They're admitting the same kind of kid from DePaul Prep, okay? So a lot of those characteristics are the same. Top majors, ton of overlap, right? Both schools have business. Both schools are really big in health sciences. Both schools have engineering, okay? Nursing at both. Very similar universities in a lot of ways, right? Where you see a difference here, right? So the sticker price for school A is between 67 and 71K per year, right? Now, the difference there is typically because some majors are a little more, cost a little bit more than others. Some housing options are a little higher than others, but generally speaking, we're talking about 70K for each school, okay? However, the average award, right, the average merit award from school A is between 25 and 30K, whereas school B, the average award is over 40K. So let's reveal those schools. If we can. There we go. Marquette is school A. We know Marquette. It's in our top 10 application pool. School B is Marquette, but in St. Louis. I mean, they're almost identical schools, right, in so many ways. But here's a really good example. Marquette is a slight seller, right? And St. Louis is going to be a strong buyer, right? So we're looking at two very, very similar schools with similar experiences, similar characteristics, but a much different price outcome in the end. Let's try it again. Let's do another one. These are fun. I hope you guys like these. All right, so now we're looking at some public schools, all right? So these are two regional public schools, right? So what we mean by regional is they're not the flagship school of their state, right? So U of I would be our flagship. Ohio State would be the flagship of Ohio. These are not flagship universities, okay? They're regional public universities. Neither of their sports programs are high-level D1, right? So we're looking at lower-level Division I and then high-level D2 sports at School B, okay? We're looking at two college campuses in the Midwest, classic, all right? Similar in undergraduate size, around 20,000 students on each campus undergrad, okay? Both have a 90% admit rate, very high admit rate, okay? And you look at the average DePaul Prep student admitted to each one, pretty similar, okay? Very similar profile. Top majors, again, very, very similar, okay? Now we look at the cost per year. School on the left is school A. Cost is about 60 grand a year, okay? Before any aid. The average award is somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000 a year. So we're bringing that average cost down just under $50,000 at school A, okay? School B, the price tag starts a lot lower. It's already in the mid to upper 30s with an average award of 8. So our average student admitted to school B is under 30K per year. So we're half the cost of the school on the left. And again, going back to the characteristics, these are very similar schools. They have very similar situations. Let's see what they are. Miami of Ohio, also in our top 10 of application destinations. And then a school from my home state, Grand Valley State, a school many families on here have likely not heard of, right? However, if you really dig into the numbers, they're very similar schools. Miami of Ohio has a 90% admit rate. They're admitting 9 out of 10 kids that apply. Same at Grand Valley. So 2 regional public schools with very different cost outcomes. All right, one more, because these are fun. All right, there's been a big push in the South. I talked about marketing earlier. The schools in the South have been marketing the heck out of their experience, right? Anyone that has TikTok or has looked at their child's TikTok knows that Alabama is a big deal, right? I mean, these schools in the Southeast are really drawing our students' attention, all right? So let's look at a couple schools in the South. These are both public, out-of-state, Southern universities, okay? One school's in the SEC, has big-time sports. The other's in the ACC, big-time sports, okay? So that we're going to consider them very similar. School A has slightly more undergraduate students than School B, but I'd put both of them in kind of the large public category, right? Now, here's where the big difference is. The school on the left has an under 50% admit rate. Now, that number, you'll see in a second what school it is. That number has gone down significantly in the last 3 to 5 years. Okay, that number was double that number 5 years ago. Admit rate on the other side, about 3 out of 4 students are being admitted to School B. Okay, now the average student that's been admitted, again, these numbers have gone up considerably over the last 3 to 5 years, and I lay a lot of that on marketing, on advertising. School on the left has been heavily marketed and advertised in our region, which has driven up the interest and driven up their selectivity. The school on the right is the same school. They're the same university, but they haven't been as active in driving up their application pool, okay? Very similar in the majors, right? So school on the left, much harder to get into, right? More expensive, lower average award, okay? The school on the right, again, very similar university, right? In some terms of outcomes, experience, cultural approach, all of it. Lower on the cost and higher on the discount. So school on the right, you're paying an average of $30K a year. The school on the left, you're paying in the high 40s in a good scenario. What are these schools? The University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and the University of Louisville. Both large Southern public universities, both big-time sports, both really well thought of, both tier 1 research institutions, but the one on the left has marketed itself into a position to be A, more selective, and B, give less money. So hope this is helpful for you. So to dig down that path a little further, and again, the theme of this session is not how to file the FAFSA. It's not how to find scholarships. It's how to build a cost-considerate list. So as 9th and 10th grade families, we really think this is helpful in terms of how you approach the conversation with your students. So what are some other out-of-state public buyers, right? These are 4 really good examples of schools that are going to be very similar to a lot of the schools in our top 10. But these schools are going to be buyers. So at Ole Miss, if you have a 3.0 and a mid-1200s SAT, you're going to bring your cost under $40K a year, around the cost of U of I, okay? Arkansas, they have a tiered out-of-state tuition difference. So if you have a 3.6, for example, you'll get 80% of the difference between Illinois and Arkansas paid, right? So that brings your cost under $35,000. If your GPA is a 3.2, it's like 60%. So you can go to University of Arkansas for less than it costs to go to the University of Illinois if you have a 3.6. University of Kansas, which has a humongous networking opportunity here in Chicago, their largest alumni base is here in the city. You have a 3.5 GPA, you just got 10K a year, and you're in the 30s in terms of cost, okay? And Nebraska, a Big Ten school. Everyone forgets about Nebraska, right? Nebraska and Michigan State are the same school, but they're half the price of Michigan State. 3.25 and a 21 ACT gets you 14K a year at Nebraska. That brings your cost into the 20s out of pocket, okay? At Michigan State, with that same profile, you're paying 55, okay? All right, next slide. Okay, so What does that mean? Let's talk about some schools, right? So if your student likes big public Midwest schools with D1 sports, which to be honest is the vast majority of what our juniors are telling us, right? The sellers, Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio State, Indiana, all of those schools are in our top 15 apps, and they're getting somewhere between 70 to 100,000 applications a year. They don't need to discount anybody. But the schools that are buyers that have Division One, public, big, Western Michigan, Ball State, Ohio U, Bowling Green, Oklahoma, Nebraska, Kansas, Kansas State, Illinois State, Iowa State, Kent State, Akron, all of these schools will cost less than the University of Illinois, right, for an out-of-state student. So these are all comparable options. What else we got? All right. Maybe your student likes academically focused liberal arts schools like a Wash U or a Denison or a Bucknell or a Villanova or Holy Cross or a Boston College, right? These are all private schools with price tags north of 75 to 80K, right? Well, if you like the liberal arts experience and we're not focusing our search on, big fraternities or big sports, all of these schools I have listed are going to come in with some really aggressive scholarship options. Megan mentioned earlier, private schools are in a different position than public schools, that they're going to be a little more forward in how they try to attract students with their merit aid. Now, schools that have a very low admit rate, like Villanova, like Bucknell, they don't need to do that, right? Because again, they're sellers. But buyers do, right? Buyers do, because Kalamazoo College doesn't get nearly the application volume of Bucknell or Denison. So they're going to be more attractive financially. Places like Lawrence University, Beloit, Augustana, Knox, Dickinson, Gettysburg, St. Olaf, DePauw, Luther, Rhodes, all of these schools are going to give you an excellent academic experience, liberal arts style, like a Villanova or a Holy Cross, but at a much lower price. All right, one more. Sports. This is a big theme we feel in our office all the time. I want sporty and I want warm. Okay. Well, you're going to pay for that at Florida, Texas, Georgia, and Tennessee. Also, their admit rate out of state is incredibly low, right? So what else am I looking at? I can go to South Alabama, down in Mobile, on the Gulf, right? Have a great experience for around $25,000 a year. Pretty incredible. Mississippi State, the least expensive school in the SEC, right? You're going to be under $30,000 on campus. LSU, Ole Miss, we talked about. South Florida in Tampa area. Arkansas, we talked about. Oklahoma State. Coastal Carolina, Western Kentucky, Kansas, we already mentioned. Texas State, Florida Atlantic. All of these schools are going to be very approachable, very affordable, and give you similar experiences to what some of their SEC more highly selective options will look like. All right, I'm going to kick it over to Nicole. If you haven't had a chance to meet Nicole Kucera, she's a gem. We're lucky to have her. Nicole's going to take us home.
That's very kind, Tony. Thank you. Yes. So again, for those that I haven't had a chance to meet, I am a part of our wonderful college counseling team with a focus on our 9th and 10th grade families. So again, the best thing that you could be doing right now is joining this call or showing some interest in thinking about the college process by attending one of our previous conversations or being here today. So as Tony mentioned, our focus is really just on building this cost in mind, financially balanced list. So, excuse me. So what are the things that we can be doing now, right? If you've attended our previous sessions, we've talked a lot about grades and our transcript and rigor of curriculum. That's all a part of it. And now keeping in mind with what we're going to do with our student moving forward. So really one of the best thing to be able to do is have this really true, honest, real conversation with your student on cost, including its, what that range may look like and what limitations may look like. So again, I think one of the best things you could be doing is attending this session right now and getting informed. But then taking that step forward and having a real conversation with your student. So Sometimes what we hear is, when you eventually sign up for that junior meeting with your college counselor, with Tony, Kelly, Kate, or Sam, sometimes we hear that, well, we'll figure it out with cost. And as we all appreciate that, we do want to be really realistic, and Tony's examples that we just went through and these cost comparison schools is a really great way, I think, to start that conversation. As you figure out what is going to be a priority for your student in the college experience, and how there are a lot of similar schools out there, once you start breaking it down, as we just did. So being really real with your student. And then being honest about where they are within the college's application pool and within our own student community here at DePaul. So again, in previous conversations or sessions, we've talked about, I think, like what our school profile looks like and how all of the colleges that your student will apply to will receive DePaul Prep student profile and everything that DePaul has to offer. And that's kind of what your student is against in our kind of student population. So just to share a little bit, and Tony, please correct me if I'm misremembering, but our average student GPA by the time that a student, again, keep in mind, this is by the time that your student is applying to colleges. So you've had a couple of years of high school, but our average GPA is that like 3.65 maybe, to about like a 3.8.
Yeah, sounds about right.
No. Just about that range. So that is our average GPA. As always, we we'll have students on both ends of that spectrum on the other side, and that's where previous session we talked about weight in GPA. So if you're in a higher level honors class or an AP or an IB class, that's where students often reach above that GPA range. So having that honest conversation with your student, you can easily look up for any college, what's kind of the average GPA, what's the average test score. We do have some testing coming up again in the spring. That's just to give you an indicator of where you are along that path. And then really remaining open to considering like a range of these options. So just knowing, like, I remember when I learned about Jeff Selingo and buyers and sellers, like, it was crazy to think about that, but it's true. And that's the reality that our families are living in, that these are how these universities are businesses and function. So understanding that there are some schools that, do fit, what schools fit in that buyer's range, what schools fit in that seller's range, and what is going to be the best for us. So again, I'd encourage you to start with maybe going through those comparison lists that Tony went through, just as kind of a conversation starter and an eye-opening visual to begin that conversation with your student and family. As always, this is, we want you to have a takeaway from this. And again, okay, this is all a lot of information. What can I be doing with it? So, having those conversations. Again, I encourage you, use this presentation however you can, use us how you can, to kind of initiate that and seeing where your student is kind of aligning at this point in their high school experience. And then arming yourself with any information that you can use to really look at these schools, through what's going to be in your best interest, if that's a buyer school or a seller school. We are going to hear a little bit later or soon to give you some parent perspective and how you could use that when your family does eventually get to experience a college campus visit, and what kind of lens you're looking at all of the information that they're providing you with. Never too soon to build a long-term budget and, talk about what your student savings look like. Personal experience, I have an almost 2-year-old, and I remember like being flabbergasted by the amount projected to put into her 529 to see how much money we're going to need to be saving. So being realistic, using your network, or, if you have a financial advisor or whatever you may use, to make sure that this is a part of your student's financial plan, and be realistic in what that could result for their college list. With that, we're going to talk about building this list. So I really do encourage you to start with some of the schools we reviewed here and kind of go from there. And keep in mind that this is evolving. This is a lot of information, having to take into your personal family financials and kind of sort through it. Use us. Again, eventually, when your students are juniors, they'll begin their junior meetings with our wonderful college counselors, who can really help pare down or talk through what that list looks like. Whew. Okay, that was a lot. Do we want to offer questions to Megan if you still have a couple minutes?
Yeah, I'm open.
Okay. Sorry, I was trying to multitask and go through the chat at the same time.
We grabbed some questions from the original RSVP. Were there any that were best directed towards Megan, you think?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna preview this really quickly. I think, Megan, if you could just share at first, that I know earlier you addressed it in the chat about just like FAFSA and what needs to be included. If you could just share that with everybody.
Yes, absolutely. So these questions always scare me a little bit because thinking about 2028 or 2029 is kind of freaky, but it's coming up. So with the FAFSA, they always look at tax data from 2 years back. So the reason they do that is, let's say for this year, for example, for 25-26 FAFSA, they're looking at 2023 tax data. Some people haven't filed their 2024 taxes because of extensions, or, we're still within that window where people can reasonably not have filed those taxes yet. So that's why they always go 2 years back. So 25-26, 25, 24, 23. That's the tax year we're looking at. So for the question in the chat, the parent had asked their students starting in fall 2028. So that's going to be the 28-29 FAFSA. So if we go 2 years back from that start year, that's going to bring us to 2026. So 2 years is always the rule with that FAFSA data. Something to note about that, right, is a lot of times parents get maybe a little bit nervous because they don't make what they made 2 years ago. Their taxes look very different from what they did at that time. A lot can happen in 2 years. So schools can work with you on that. So if that's ever a concern of yours, there are appeals that your family can complete to make sure that the data that they're going off of is as accurate as possible. So something to keep in mind when we're talking about the tax year piece. But in terms of what's included on the FAFSA, they changed the FAFSA quite a bit in this last school year. So what they do is they pull over the tax data from the IRS for your student and for yourself. So anything that's they don't look at everything on the taxes, but certain fields, they'll pull those in. So that's things like income earned from work, adjusted gross income, taxes paid, maybe credits claimed on your taxes. But aside from that data, they also want to collect information about assets. So that's going to be the total of cash, savings, checkings, balances that you have, investments. It gets a little bit specific with investments. They don't count things like retirement plans since you don't really have access to those. But if you have other sort of investments, maybe an investment property like a rental, they would want to know the total of those things. So these are all pieces that get included in that overall calculation to help determine that student aid index like we talked about earlier. And that's for both the student and the parent.
Awesome. Thank you, Megan. Another question that we received on some RSVPs, was kind of like navigating loans and grants and scholarships, and how do you know exactly what who's the best person to talk to find out what's offered at each university?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of times when you're coming in as a new student, they're going to gear you toward the admissions office. So they're going to want you to be working with the admissions team to help kind of determine what's going on, but you always have access to that school's financial aid office too. So the financial aid officials will work with incoming students and current students to help get those things figured out. So the financial aid office at the school, even if you haven't applied, you just want some information, you can give them a call and just ask your questions and see what kind of general info they can provide for you. It seems like you have a really strong team here as well at DePaul Prep. So your college counselors can help you to kind of determine, I heard about the Pell Grant. What is that? They'll
Mhm.
know, right? So those kinds of questions you can always bounce off of your current resources, but you can also reach out to the school's financial aid offices or admissions offices directly just to ask some more of those general questions. Now, until you apply and get admitted, they might not have those actual figures for you, but in this data collecting period, you can definitely reach out and just see what information you can collect in the meantime.
Awesome. Let's see here. Anything else in the chat that Tony or Kelly you caught that maybe we can tap Megan for?
Yeah, I've been getting to many of them and most
Yeah.
of them. Really good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, good question.
Yep. A question just popped up from Janet. Thanks for asking about the scholarships and outside scholarships. I'm glad you asked. I put the link to our college planning page in there. If you can't tell, we're trying to drive everybody to what we think is the best college planning page in the business. Our team curates a list of outside scholarships that we're made aware of, like outside organizations will often email us or share information with us. We sort of house that on our college planning page. So you can get to that page and look at what some of those awards look like. Most outside awards, although there are a few available you can start thinking about as 10th graders, are going to be mostly focused towards the back end of junior year, early part of senior year, where they'll start applying to some of these foundational awards, things that you can bring in from the outside. It is valuable as a family to maybe start looking at getting your student registered for like what's called a scholarship engine. And again, we have links to probably 20 of those on our college planning page. And so basically the student would fill in some basic demographics, a place like FastWeb or scholarships.com or Niche or some of these other places. And their inbox would then be filled with scholarships that they could potentially qualify for, or and something to be aware of. Your students actually need to check their email, so maybe get them a separate email account for their college stuff. Like Johnny Smith goes to college at gmail.com, because once you start getting on some of these scholarship communication lines, the inbox gets filled up very quickly. So there are engines to look at. I would say 9th and 10th grade is probably too early to start actively kind of attacking those outside scholarships, but definitely be aware of those scholarship engines, and any outside awards we'll certainly put on the college planning page. Yeah.
I have a couple hand raises that I'm going to try. I apologize, everyone. I set it so that everyone's muted. If you raised your hand, do you mind adding your question to the chat and we will address it?
One other piece I wanted to add, there was a question in the chat about working with an outside agency for help with applying to schools and kind of navigating that process. One thing I do want to add on that is you should never be paying for assistance with the FAFSA. So there are organizations out there that will tell you, we're going to help you do it the right way, so you'll get everything you can. And then they'll charge to, help you to do that. It's in the name, it's a free application, so it actually is not entirely legal to be paying or to be charging for assistance with the FAFSA. So there's going to be a lot of places out there that are going to tell you that, they're going to help you do it the right way and it's all going to be good. But you do have those free resources either with your school here or with the university that you're going to that will provide you with that assistance too. So those agencies could be helpful for other kinds of things, but as far as applying for financial aid, that should always be free for you.
Thank you for adding that.
Megan, I'm so glad you brought that up, because even folks that have maybe complicated tax histories, the FAFSA is very approachable.
Mhm.
And I'm so, like, even if folks rely on other people to file their taxes for them, the FAFSA pulls your 1040 information, right? So it's very simple and very user friendly. I can't echo that more strongly. You and your student can do this. It doesn't take an outside professional to file the FAFSA. Totally agree.
Did you say Megan had a 9:30?
I don't think they're here yet, so we're okay.
Okay. Okay.
I have seen a couple questions about GPA being weighted or unweighted. I don't know if you all can speak to that a little bit, either at DePaul Prep or like what colleges are looking for.
Yeah. Yes. So the average GPA that we mentioned earlier, the kind of like 3.65 to 3.8 range, that is weighted. So again, keeping in mind if the student is in honors or AP or an IB class, that would include weighted. I'm also seeing like what do colleges look at, weighted or unweighted? Again, Tony or Kelly, somebody please correct me if I misspeak, but colleges, when they generally just ask what your GPA is, you can put in your weighted. And occasionally there may be a space where you can write unweighted and your weighted GPA. But generally we say we'll go with the weighted average. Sorry, just reviewing. Okay, great. Well, if there's not anything left for Megan, I just want to be conscious of your time. And then we have the opportunity to offer a little parent perspective from a parent of a current junior. So if that's okay, I think I'm gonna let Megan go to her meeting.
Megan, thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you for being here with us.
Absolutely.
It's a great day to be a J. It's a great day to be a J.
Always a good day, guys. Thank you so much for having me. Best of luck to you all with this search. It's going to be a little stressful, but you guys can do it. It's going to pay off.
Thank you so much.
Have a good rest of your day, guys. Bye-bye.
You too. Okay, so I'm going to kind of reset and introduce Christine Prue. Christine, I'll let you mostly speak, but she is the parent of a current junior, but does have some older children. So Christine, we connected with because she's a fan of Jeff Selingo. So we wanted to get kind of her perspective and how those resources have been helpful. And again, kind of what parents at this stage can be doing with all this information we just shared.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Perfect, because I have one earbud in because I sit here in the Spirit Shop because I also run the Spirit Shop. So just a little plug for the DePaul Prep Spirit Shop. Yes, our current junior is our youngest child. The older two didn't go to DePaul, went through the CPS system, and we are delighted to have Maisie at DePaul Prep. It's the perfect fit and just right for our family right now. So that said, they are correct. I am not just, well read on Jeff Selingo. I'm a bit of a devotee or disciple. I think that every person going through the college application process for the first time should read Buyers and Sellers. The subtitle of the book is Who Gets In and Why, because it was eye-opening. The first time we went through this, our son graduated from high school in 2019, and it was eye-opening. We thought a match was a match. We didn't understand the buyers and the sellers. We just were very naive in thinking, oh, he's a great kid. He's going to get merit money. It's sort of dangled out in front of parents. And we did not give him a chance to fall in love with some of his schools we knew he'd get into. And then when the time came for the decision, he just sort of refused to go look at some of them. He ended up going to the University of Michigan. It was actually not his top choice, but it ended up being a magical fit. Second time around with our daughter, my husband, he dangled. We were much more versed in buyers and sellers, and she was planning to study nursing. She wanted Southern, warm, rah rah. My husband dangled in front of her. You know, you make choices like your brother. You know, you're going to be carpooling. Clinicals are off site. But if you choose a place where you get a merit scholarship, um, you know, you'll have the use of a car because we're talking about major savings in money for us as a family. And, you know, at the end of the day, her perfect dream school, that was Southern rah rah. She could do sororities. She's down at TCU junior year studying nursing. So third time around, here we go. We are actually, the first couple of times we used outside counseling just because we didn't really, we were new to this. We didn't, we didn't, you know, understand how to use the supports, or maybe there just weren't enough supports for us at Peyton. So we used an outside counselor who happened to be our next door neighbor. We are not using her this third time around. One, because I'm super impressed with the resources DePaul Prep offers, and it's not my first rodeo. So we are going in eyes wide open. When we are putting together our list for Maisie, our third, we definitely have a good, you know, good range of buyers and sellers. And in some cases, I've been forcing Maisie to look at, you know, schools where, you know, she's not as excited about them. For example, we're going skiing for spring break. She wants to see UC Boulder. I'm saying we're also going to look at University of Denver. So I think they offer her similar experiences. She wants to be close to nature, close for hiking and skiing. So yeah, let's look at both schools. We're also very upfront. You know, I would like to say, you know, if merit money is an option, if you want to go to grad school and she says she does, you know, she has to look at that, and we have to look at that too. So we're, you know, very upfront with her about, you know, here's the pot of money, here's what we can afford, here's what we want to spend, because you know, we don't want to work forever. So yeah, it's just having that honest discussion with your kids helps them go into the process informed and helps them make good decisions. So we'll see. Third, you know, this is our third time going through the process. We've visited some schools with her. We're going to visit some more. And, you know, I just cannot stress enough who gets in and why. Your child will be qualified for nearly every school they apply to. And they won't get into all of them. And it will be eye-opening to you. Some of the schools they get into and other schools they don't get into. You just, there's often no rhyme or reason. And Jeff Salingo sat in on admissions meetings with 3 different schools. And one of the things he pointed out is, was your child's application read in the morning or the afternoon? Like, you don't want to be the one that comes across their desk at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, right? That actually impacts accept rates. So it's crazy things like that that he saw. You know, is your child going to be involved in sports? Are you an alumni? Like, all of those things actually impact the decision. So it's just a really eye-opening process, and it's really a business, and you just can't take it personally. You know, you just have to know your child is qualified. Where they get in is, you know, it's not a reflection on you, and it's not a reflection on them in some cases, because they are qualified. It's just they're competing against their peers. They're competing against a lot of kids with the same wonderful grade point averages. And, you know, the Common App has just made it so easy for kids to apply to 15 schools, 20 schools. And the colleges are trying to drive down their admit rate and, you know, increase their yield. So, you know, I hand out this book and tell everybody who asks me a college, you know, application question, I'm like, you have to read Jeff Salingo. So that's my number one recommendation. And my other is, you know, give your kid a chance to fall in love with the schools that you're pretty sure they're going to get into. Made that mistake with child number one. We only went to, oh, these are, you know, of course you're qualified, right? But these are the reach schools. These are the ones that have the low admit rates. And he wasn't interested in visiting some of the other schools, which might have been a great fit. So with our second child, we gave her a chance to fall in love with some of those schools we were pretty sure she was going to get into. And it was just a very different experience second time around. So I wish you all the best of luck. Happy to answer any questions. And that's Nicole, Tony, I don't really have anything else without like talking for too long, and you know I can do that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that unless people have specific questions. and come visit me in the spirit shop.
You can drop them in the chat too. I can totally field them from there. And
I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah,
I'm on my phone because I'm in the spirit shop, so I don't know that I
Yeah.
can see the
yeah.
chat as well as I could on
I
a
can get them to
computer.
you. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I would say, Christine, if you maybe could give an example of like going on a campus tour with Maisie and having that like buyer seller mentality. Like, what are you looking for? What are you listening for? Does it
So
matter? Yeah.
a lot of what, it's hard to know sometimes. So talking to, the parents of, for example, good friends of ours have kids at UC Boulder. And, it's hard to tell. They seem to me to be a seller. In that I like to say, seller, you're selling yourself to them, whereas buyers, they're trying to buy you, trying to get you to come. Um, so you can reach out to parents, and I did this with a friend. I'm like, hey, so is UC Boulder like University of Michigan? Thank you for your out-of-state tuition. We're glad to have you here. Or do they actually offer merit money to kids from out of state? And I got a very straightforward answer. Thank you for your out-of-state tuition. UC Boulder is not a merit money kind of school. On the flip side, visited with a friend whose daughter's at the University of Washington in Seattle, and she came right out and said, "Hey, I got it's not a huge amount, but I got a nice little merit scholarship that renews every year, and that makes a difference." So asking, for ones where it's not very clear on the list, ask your counselors. They know from past experience if some of these schools, if they're not listed as buyers and sellers, what your chance of merit money is. And nothing's guaranteed. Um, and I will say, touring Marquette with my middle child, they have a great nursing program, great fit. It's a cool city. Walking around the campus with her, it was the best tour we had. And we went on a lot of tours. It was the best tour we had. The tour guide was amazing, so personalized. They put you in small groups based on major, really small groups. Um, and at the end of the day, my daughter came away saying, I would be really happy here. And that was my goal. Just knowing that here's a school we're pretty sure she's going to get into. We think she might get some merit money. Um, and giving her a chance to fall in love with that school. Now she didn't end up going there because it didn't quite, it wasn't quite warm enough for what she wanted. And she did, in theory, want to go far away and go somewhere warm. The reality of that becomes very different freshman year. I will tell you all, it becomes very different freshman year when they start to get a little homesick and all that. She's worked it all out, but yeah, give your kid a chance to fall in love with a school you're pretty sure they're going to get into, with a school that might be a buyer, that might try and woo you with some merit money. Anything else, Nicole? Did I touch on what you wanted?
Yeah, that was wonderful. Again, I appreciate again your discipleship, and I think that just it's helpful to hear from somebody who's in it but has also seen a lot of things. And what has been helpful to you guys is having those open conversations with your kids and say, hey, here's where we're at, and here's what would really help if we start looking at a variety of different schools. So just being open to that, I think was great to hear from your experience. So thank you.
I would echo that perspective too, Christine. Like, I think, not speaking for all students, but I will speak for a majority of students we meet with. I think students tend to say, well, where can I get, what's the best school I can get into? What they mean by best is most selective, right? Mm-hmm. Which is a different conversation for a different Zoom call. But so generally speaking, again, if you think about it as a business, a school that does not need to discount won't, right? If you're running a business, your own business, and you have enough customers to pay full for the product you're producing, then why would you put it on sale, right? So understanding that if your student's a higher achiever, 3.8, 3.9, 4.0, multiple APs, multiple honors, sure, their list, you can certainly add reach schools to that list, right? And as your list gets more selective, your opportunity for cost-efficient options is going to get smaller. The other way you could look at your child's performance, right? Let's say you want to really champion the fact that your child has worked super hard over 4 years, earned that position as a really high achieving student, maybe looking at it differently, not as college as a prize to get into, but maybe they can leverage that 4.1, 4.2 GPA at a school where they're one of the top 10% in the school. And they're going to be offered a presidential scholarship, a half tuition scholarship, a fellowship, an opportunity to join the honors program. They're now a big fish in a much smaller pond, and they've really elevated their experience, right? So what Christine said about looking at those schools that were more match options, I think it's really important to reframe our mindset that the higher achieving student doesn't need to lift their list higher. They maybe need to look at the opportunities at schools that really want them, right? To go to a school where they can pay half of what they pay at a school that's more selective and get more benefits potentially as a student who's one of the stronger kids in the pool. So that's another way to look at it.
Yeah, I have a dear friend whose daughter is at the University of Wisconsin in the honors program, pre-med, double major. I mean, this kid has knocked it out of the park since pre-K, and we've known her since, our daughters met on the playground at age 3. And, she was choosing between, it was, her parents' oldest child, and she ended up choosing between Boston College, where it was an amazing, they knew her by name. They, they knew all this about her, and the University of Wisconsin honors program. And I think she just felt there she would have more of an opportunity to be a star. And they didn't know her by name in the same way when she went to her admitted students day, but she's really charted an amazing path for herself. And I have no doubt she's going to have the most amazing future. And, at the end of the day, the University of Wisconsin is an amazing school, but it's not as expensive as Boston College.
No.
So, she's saving some money there because she's probably going to med school.
Yeah. That's a good point. Think about what's beyond 4 years, right? That's the other thing to think about. Yeah. All right, good. Nicole, I think we handled it. We did well.
Yeah, I think so.
Right.
Thank you so much, Christine, for adding
Thanks, Christine.
That perspective. It's just always helpful. Yes,
highlight some new products.
Yeah. Pitch the Spirit Shop for sure.
All right, bye all. Thanks so much.
Thanks again.
Bye
bye. Yes, Tony, thank you to you guys for addressing things in the chat. I will be sure, yes, plug for myself. Happy to meet with any and all 9th and 10th grade families when they're ready. If their students want to pop in first, if you want to have a phone call with me first or a meeting, I'm more than happy to discuss anything and all things college related at this point and what you can be doing. So please reach out. I will share the slide deck. If you RSVP'd, I'm going to shoot it to everybody who RSVP'd. I'll share the slide deck with everybody and a bunch of the links that we've shared in the presentation and in the chat. So thank you so much. I did see some stuff about Maya as well.
I'm dropping it in the chat right now.
Oh, excellent. Thank you, Tony. And yeah, we appreciate you spending your time interested in having these conversations with us and looking forward to more. Oh, I didn't even pitch the next ones. So our next coffee and conversation will be Wednesday, April 9th. That one will return to in person. And we're going to be talking about standardized testing and what that means with test optional and all that good stuff and what students are doing here. That is just around our own testing time, correct, Mr. Menestra?
Yeah, we got April. Yeah, I mean, it's the day after, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's
April
8th. April 8th.
Intentional, I think. So we'll be navigating all things around testing. And then keep in mind for our sophomore and junior families, the college fair is just around the corner. So eager to talk about that. And again, happy to answer any questions that come up in the meantime.
Quick plug for the college fair. So sophomore families on the call. Freshmen, you'll have your time. Sophomores and juniors are invited to our college fair. This would be your first time through, probably, unless you have older students. Our college fair is April 14th. It's a Monday. Runs from 6 to 8. Right now, we have about 115 colleges RSVP'd. It's an excellent event. And again, just sophomore, juniors, and parents are invited. More information will come out soon. And we're also going to pre-register all the sophomores and juniors in advisory. So it's a really excellent event. Good chance to start exploring.
Yeah. Excellent.
Cool.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Great work, everyone. Thank you.
Have a wonderful rest of your day.